Hollow Knight had a really interesting charm system, where the player would be able to make a build that suited their playstyle. If you wanted to make spells stronger and use them more often, then you could use charms like Shaman Stone, Soul Catcher, and Spell Twister. If you wanted to prioritize making your nail faster and stronger, then you can use charms like Mark of Pride, Unbreakable Strength, or Quick Slash. You could even have a mix of both for more of a middle-of-the-road build. My personal build for Pantheon 5 was Shaman Stone, Fragile Strength, Spell Twister, and Quick Slash. Because I liked using spells, but I also wanted to use my nail a lot too. But Silksong really expands on that concept, and in this video I want to take a look at what made Silksong so great, and that's its versatility in the different kinds of playstyles any player could have. At the crux of what makes Silksong's playstyle so versatile is the introduction of crests. There are a total of 7 different crests in the game: Hunter, Reaper, Wanderer, Beast, Architect, Witch, and Shaman. And while I can imagine that everyone has their favorites, each of the crests have their own sets of ups and downs. Now, this isn't going to be a deep dive of all the crests, because there are different aspects to what make the playstyle in Silksong so versatile, but I do want to take a look at some of them, just to showcase that they really do allow for different ways to play. Each of the crests have different ranges and what tools you can add to it. For example, the Architect's Crest is more suited towards tool usage, as it has 3 red slots and it also has 2 blue and 2 yellow slots, but there is no room at all for silk skills. So based on that alone, personally I would say that it's probably one of the best crests in the game. But for me, I never really used it, simply because I couldn't get used to the way that Hornet would swing the nail. And I'm sure that's something that, with a little patience, I would have gotten used to, but I ended up using a couple of different crests throughout my playthrough, and never really the Architect. And then there's also the Wanderer's Crest, which has basically no range, but has really fast slashes, similar to kind of like how the Quick Slash worked in Hollow Knight, and overall makes you feel pretty nimble while using it. But a downside to it is that it only has 1 red tool slot, but it does allow for other movement and passive abilities to be utilized, which really helps in its nimbleness. So this might be for someone who doesn't really care about tools much at all. Throughout my playthrough, I used 1 main crest and I switched between a couple of others depending on the boss or the area, or if I just really wanted to try a different crest in general. But the crest that I used the most was the Reaper. It is characterized by its slow swing, but it has one of the longest ranges. The other couple of crests that I used were the Hunters, Shaman, and I would throw Wanderer in there every once in a while. The Hunter's crest had a little less range than the Reaper, but allowed me to feel like I could move a little bit more, and the Shaman's crest had the greatest range in the game because it was more like a projectile. For me, the Hunter and Reaper's crest were pretty interchangeable during boss battles because they allowed for similar builds in terms of tools. But the reason I stuck with the Reaper more often was simply because I liked the way I could pogo with it, and that's really it, if I'm being honest. I got used to how slow it could be, and it honestly helped me be a little bit more patient in general because I couldn't just charge in with it. And on the contrary to something like the Architect's Crest, the Shaman's Crest is geared more towards silk skills. So it has 3 slots for silk skills and 2 slots for passive abilities for blue tools that could be used to aid silk regeneration, or some other things depending on your playstyle. This is what I find pretty cool about the Crest system. A lot of players have their own different playstyles. What works for one might not work for another, and this is really just based off how the nail swings and what can be added. Which brings me to the tool system of the game. But before I continue, if you could please subscribe, that would be awesome. Now, I'll be completely honest here. When I found my setup, I did not stray that far from it, basically ever. At least the red tools that I used rarely, if ever, changed. My favorites were the Cogfly and the Flea Brew. But there are so many different tools in the game that they make up around 50% of the 100% completion rate of Silksong, which is crazy. Tools fall under 3 different categories. So we have red tools, which are more combat oriented, blue tools, which are more passive, but still combat or silk oriented, and then we have yellow tools, which are more for exploration or kind of a little bit more support oriented. Now, that is not the end all be all for the color categories, but it is generally what they fall under. This is really where playstyles start to differentiate. Similar to Hollow Knight, tools are more equivalent to what charms were. So if crests were the vessels in which we have our nail swings, tools are what makes the crests a little bit more viable in terms of setup. Maybe the player values being strong and having more health, so they might choose the Plasmium File and the Flint State. Or maybe they want to throw weapons instead, so they might choose something like the Long Pin or the Conch Cutter or the Cogflies. There's a plethora of red tools, but the blue tools are just as useful. I like to use the blue tools more for silk regeneration. My top 3 personal blue tools were the Injector Band, which I feel like probably everyone used, Weave Light, and the Spool Extender. I would actually like to give a special shout out to the Wreath of Purity for saving me from even more frustration and bile water, because without it, I think I would have screamed so many times. Continuing on though, there are some other really helpful blue tools like the Reserve Bind, which gives the player an extra heal when they don't have enough silk, or the Pollet Pouch, which applies venom to your tools so they do extra damage. Honestly, I have paid attention to the yellow tools the least. I had my compass and magnetite brooch for rosaries, and I was pretty much set. I do really like the silk speed anklets though, because it's always nice to go faster. There is one more piece of the puzzle that adds to this different options for players in their playstyles, and that would be silk skills. And if I'm being honest, I don't really have much to say about the silk skills in general. Out of all the different aspects of crests and tools, I feel like silk skills are probably varied player to player the least. There are 6 silk skills in total, and if I'm being honest, I feel like there are only 4 that are practical and useful, and 4 is really pushing it because the last one I'm going to mention is just because I really think it's cool. So the ones that I think are the most viable are Silk Spear, Threadstorm, Counter, and the Pale Nails. The Silk Spear is the first skill that you get and is overall pretty solid in general. It has a good range and seems to have decent strength as well. So if you feel like you can't get close enough to an enemy, or you don't really like getting close to enemies, then this might be a good option for you. However, my personal favorite is the Threadstorm, and I popped off when I first saw what it was. What does it look like? Ah! That's the one in the first game! But it is overall just a solid option for offense. You can get into the middle of an enemy pool and hit multiple enemies with it. Plus, if you continually press the skill button, then the animation and damage output is extended, which is pretty awesome. And from what I'm aware, the game doesn't actually tell you this. I had a friend tell me, and I was like, what are we doing here? I was shocked. But Threadstorm is pretty much my most used silk skill, as I can imagine it is for most other people. But if it's not and you use a different silk skill that I haven't mentioned here, then please let me know in the comments. Next would be the Counter. Now, I found the Phantom pretty late in Act 2, so I didn't have it for a while. But I think the Counter is the most beneficial for bosses. Similar to the Threadstorm, it can hit multiple enemies, but at least with a boss, I can time the Counter properly. Now, I talked about the Pale Nails earlier, and I honestly just think they're pretty cool. I don't really have much to say on them at all. I think Rune Rage is super cool as well. The startup is way too long, and the chances of it missing literally everything is so high, which is why I think it's cool, but I think it's less useful than Pale Nails. So we have so many different aspects of the playstyle that is customizable, and I truly do believe that it is one of the things that makes Silksong so great. Obviously, there are other things like boss and enemy battles, world building, design, story, exploration, music, and plenty of other things that I'm sure people loved about the game. But for me, the fights are what keep me coming back, and sometimes also wanting to quit the game all at the same time. But to be able to change up my playstyle and keep coming back with new builds kept me more sane than anything else. But let me know in the comments what your favorite builds were, what your favorite crests were, favorite tools were, red tools, yellow tools, blue tools. I'm interested to know. I want to know if we all choose similar, and maybe there is, I mean, I'm sure there's a meta to the game, but I want to know if we all choose similar tools, if some people have a completely different playstyles. Like, you know, I think that'd be pretty cool.